how to quietly make the avoidants anxious to reconnect. And gentlemen, today we're diving into a transformative approach to rekindling connections with partners who tend to be emotionally distant. It's about subtle yet powerful strategies that can reignite the spark and draw them back into a meaningful relationship. Here are 5 key principles to guide you on this journey. When trying to reconnect with someone who tends to avoid emotional closeness, the way you communicate can either open a door or quietly reinforce the walls they've built. It's not about dramatic confrontations or emotionally charged conversations. Those often push avoidant individuals further away. Instead, it's about soft communication, a calm, composed, and compassionate approach that draws them in without pressure or judgment. Soft communication begins with emotional regulation, yours. When you're hurt or frustrated, it's tempting to express those feelings in an urgent or intense way, especially if you've been longing for connection. But the avoidant mind interprets intensity as a threat. It triggers their default mode of withdrawal, often leaving you feeling more disconnected than before. That's why tone, body language, and word choice matter more than you might think. Speaking in a grounded and warm tone, maintaining open body language, and choosing words that come from a place of curiosity rather than criticism can transform the entire dynamic. It's essential to start from a place of empathy. Avoidant individuals aren't cold. They're often protecting themselves from vulnerability they never learned to manage. That protection shows up as distance, independence, and an allergy to deep emotional expression. When you recognize that, you stop taking their behavior personally and begin approaching them with compassion rather than resentment. That shift in energy alone can be disarming. It tells their nervous system, I'm not here to overwhelm you, I'm here to understand you. Soft communication also requires validation. This doesn't mean agreeing with everything or ignoring your own needs. It means acknowledging their reality, even if it's different from yours. If they express a need for space, instead of responding with anxiety or guilt, you might say, I understand that space is important for you. I'm here when you're ready. This simple sentence does 2 powerful things. It respects their boundary and it communicates your steady presence. To someone who's avoidant, this can be surprisingly comforting. Timing plays a huge role in this as well. Conversations that aim for reconnection should never be launched in the heat of conflict or when either person is emotionally flooded. Wait for calmer moments. It's in these spaces of peace that soft communication has the most power. You might gently express something like, I really enjoy when we're close and I'd love to feel more of that with you at your pace. This way, you're sharing a desire, not issuing a demand. You're inviting, not pushing. Avoidant individuals often feel more comfortable with practical or logical conversations rather than emotionally loaded dialogues. So part of soft communication is learning how to express emotional truths in a way that feels less overwhelming to them. That might mean using metaphors, asking open-ended questions, or talking about emotions in terms of behaviors and experiences rather than labels and expectations. For instance, instead of saying, I need you to be more emotionally available, you could try, I've noticed I feel really good when we spend time talking without distractions. It makes me feel closer to you. It's subtle, but that shift changes the whole vibe. And perhaps the most underrated element of soft communication is presence. Sometimes it's not what you say, it's how you show up. Being calm, patient, and consistent sends a signal that you're not going anywhere, that you're emotionally solid, and that they don't have to manage your feelings for you. This gives the avoidant person room to breathe and feel safe enough to consider re-engaging. Ultimately, soft communication is about leadership. It's about setting the emotional tone without controlling the outcome. It's about embodying the kind of safety and emotional maturity that makes it easy for others to lean in. You're not chasing, not begging, not manipulating. You're simply showing up in a grounded way that makes reconnection feel like a choice, not an obligation. And in that space, avoidants can slowly find their way back to closeness on their own terms. One of the most counterintuitive yet powerful strategies for encouraging an avoidant partner to reconnect is offering them space freely, without resentment or emotional strings attached. At first glance, this may feel like the opposite of what you should do when you're yearning for closeness. After all, every part of you might want to close the gap, to hold them tighter, to talk it out, to fix the distance. But with someone who leans avoidant in their attachment style, closeness that's too constant or emotionally intense can trigger a deep internal alarm system. Their nervous system interprets too much proximity as a loss of control or threat to their autonomy, and the reflex is to retreat. Understanding this instinct is the first step. Avoidant individuals often grew up in environments where emotional intimacy wasn't modeled in a healthy way. Maybe they learned that relying on others was unsafe, or that showing emotions resulted in disappointment or rejection. As adults, they protect themselves with space, independence, and self-sufficiency. This isn't because they don't care. It's because care feels risky. When you give them space freely, you're not just stepping back, you're signaling safety. You're saying, I trust you and I trust myself. I don't need to chase or cling to feel secure. Now, this isn't about playing games or being passive-aggressive with distance. It's about genuine self-awareness and emotional self-regulation. You offer space not as punishment, but as a gift. You recognize that healing and closeness can't be forced. They unfold in moments of mutual willingness. So when your partner withdraws or shows signs of needing emotional room, instead of reacting with panic or protest, you acknowledge their rhythm. You might say, take the time you need. I'm here. That one sentence, spoken with sincerity and calm energy, has more impact than a dozen arguments or over-explanations. What's fascinating is that this space, when offered with confidence and warmth, can actually create a magnetic pull. The avoidant person begins to feel something they're not used to, emotional freedom and connection. They don't feel cornered, smothered, or obligated. And ironically, it's in this very atmosphere that they begin to feel safe enough to lean in. The moment they realize they're not being chased, not being pressured, something shifts. Their walls lower, not because you forced them, but because you stopped pushing against them. During this period of space, it's crucial that you stay grounded in your own life. Focus on your passions, friendships, routines, and personal growth. Not only does this give your energy somewhere healthy to land, but it also signals emotional independence. You're showing, not telling, that you're whole on your own. This is not about pretending you don't care or playing it cool. It's about actually tending to your own life in a way that is enriching and fulfilling. The avoidant person may begin to feel a subtle fear of losing your presence, not because you threatened to leave, but because you've demonstrated that you don't need to chase. You create contrast. Before, they may have felt overwhelmed by closeness. Now they see you calm, composed, and content. No pressure, no guilt trips, no emotional chaos. That contrast creates intrigue, even longing. Humans, including avoidants, are drawn to emotional safety. When you offer space while staying emotionally available and centered, you're embodying a kind of love that feels mature and non-invasive. That's rare and it's powerful. This entire process takes patience. You can't rush someone's comfort zone to expand, but you can stop reinforcing the cycle of push and pull. The more consistently you offer emotional breathing room, the more chances your partner has to organically reconnect. Not out of fear, not out of obligation, but out of genuine desire. They begin to associate your presence with peace, not pressure. And from there, connection starts to rebuild, quietly but surely. When emotions run high in a relationship, especially with an avoidant partner, it's incredibly tempting to use guilt as a way to pull them back in. You might not even realize you're doing it. It can show up in subtle phrases like, I guess I just care more than you, or you always do this when I need you most. These statements, while often coming from a place of pain, can feel like emotional manipulation to someone who already fears being engulfed or controlled. For avoidance, guilt doesn't inspire closeness. It creates pressure, and pressure triggers retreat. If the goal is to reconnect using guilt as a trap, it might temporarily elicit a response or a promise to change, but it comes at the cost of genuine emotional safety. The avoidant person will feel coerced rather than chosen, and that distinction is everything. Emotional connection built on guilt is fragile and short-lived. True reconnection needs to come from a place of freedom, not obligation. The first step in moving away from guilt-based communication is becoming aware of your emotional responses. Are you expressing your needs from a place of centeredness or from panic? Are you trying to get them to feel what you're feeling, or are you simply sharing your truth? This is where self-regulation becomes vital. When you feel abandoned or disconnected, instead of lashing out or withdrawing, pause. Take a breath. Ask yourself, what am I really needing right now? And can I express that need without blaming? Using I statements is one of the most effective ways to communicate without guilt tripping. Instead of saying, you never make time for me, try, I've been feeling a little disconnected lately and I'd love to spend some intentional time together. That shift is subtle but powerful. You're not accusing, you're inviting. You're taking ownership of your emotional world without making them responsible for fixing it. This style of communication is not only more digestible for avoidant individuals, it also builds emotional trust. Avoidants are highly sensitive to perceived emotional demands. When they sense that they're being asked to carry more than they're capable of, or that their autonomy is being compromised, they shut down. So instead of pushing them to understand how much they've hurt you or step up, it's often more effective to acknowledge what they are doing well. This doesn't mean ignoring your needs. It means leading with appreciation rather than critique. Something like, I really appreciated how you supported me last week. It made me feel seen, can go a long way in reinforcing positive behaviors without pressure. Also, consider how often guilt shows up in non-verbal ways. The sighs, the silence, the cold shoulders, these are all forms of protest behavior. They don't always look like anger, but they carry the same message. You hurt me and I want you to feel it. While this reaction is human, it often backfires with someone avoidant. Instead of drawing them closer, it makes them feel like they're failing. And avoidants don't handle emotional failure well. Many would rather disappear than face repeated reminders of what they're not providing. The goal is to create a dynamic where your partner feels safe showing up, not where they feel they're constantly disappointing you. And ironically, the more you remove guilt from the equation, the more likely they are to take initiative in the relationship. They start to feel like they want to show up, not like they have to. That kind of energy shift can completely transform a connection. By stepping away from guilt, you're not only creating space for your partner to feel safe, you're also reinforcing your own emotional maturity. You're saying, I can feel deeply without needing to control the outcome. That's strength. And in that strength, avoidants begin to feel something rare and compelling, the freedom to come closer, not because they're guilted into it, but because they genuinely want to. Cultivating self-reliance is one of the most transformative moves you can make when dealing with an avoidant partner. Not only does it shift the energy dynamic in the relationship, but it also creates the emotional spaciousness that someone with avoidant tendencies needs in order to feel safe enough to reconnect. Self-reliance isn't about pretending you don't care or cutting off emotionally to gain the upper hand. It's about truly anchoring yourself in your own inner stability, your passions, your friendships, and your personal sense of worth. That energy-centered, steady, and self-sufficient is magnetic. When you're overly focused on the avoidant partner and the gap they've created, it's easy to start losing yourself in the chase. You begin to organize your emotions around their availability. If they text, you feel secure. If they pull away, you spiral. This puts all your power in their hands, which not only feels heavy to them, but is also exhausting for you. Cultivating self-reliance is about taking that power back, not from a place of spite, but from a place of self-love. You say, I choose to feel good in my life, regardless of whether someone is leaning in or pulling away. When someone avoidant senses that you're emotionally dependent on them for your well-being, it makes them feel pressured, responsible, or even trapped. That's often when they pull back harder. But when they see you thriving on your own, enjoying your life, pursuing goals, and connecting with others in meaningful ways, it changes the dynamic. They begin to experience your presence as light, open, and non-demanding. That's when curiosity starts to grow. They might start wondering what you're up to. They notice the glow in your energy, and without you needing to say a word, they feel the shift. This doesn't mean you suppress your emotional needs or hide your desire for connection. It means you tend to those needs in multiple ways, not just through your partner. You begin to lean into the things that make you feel alive, fulfilled, and connected on your own terms. That might mean diving deeper into creative projects, spending more intentional time with close friends, traveling, moving your body, learning something new, or simply finding joy in solitude. It's not about proving anything, it's about returning to yourself. Self-reliance also changes how you communicate. Instead of speaking from desperation or longing, you begin to speak from grounded desire. Instead of saying, I need you to call me more, you might say, I really enjoy it when we check in during the day. It adds warmth to my routine. This is a calm, clear statement of value, not a plea. It leaves room for the avoidant person to respond without feeling cornered. The energy is inviting rather than demanding. Something powerful also happens within you when you embody self-reliance. Your emotional resilience increases. You stop being so reactive. Their silence doesn't hit as hard. Their distance doesn't destabilize you in the same way. And ironically, it's often this emotional stability that brings them closer. Not because you tricked them, but because you created a space where closeness feels safe and optional, not compulsory. The work of becoming self-reliant isn't always comfortable. It can bring up grief, especially if you've spent a long time over-functioning in the relationship. But it's deeply empowering. You begin to reclaim your identity, your joy, and your ability to feel full without relying on another person to complete the picture. From that place, any connection you build is stronger because it's coming from two whole people choosing each other, not two halves clinging out of fear. And that kind of love is not just more sustainable, it's more satisfying. Patience and understanding are essential when navigating a relationship with an avoidant partner. It's easy to want immediate answers, instant reassurance, or quick shifts in behavior, especially when you've been feeling emotionally deprived or disconnected. But avoidant individuals often move at a slower emotional pace, not because they don't care, but because vulnerability feels foreign and sometimes overwhelming to them. Pushing them to change too quickly often backfires, reinforcing their instinct to retreat. True progress comes when you learn to work with their rhythm rather than against it. Patience is not passivity. passivity, it's the active decision to stay grounded while someone else moves through their own emotional process. It's choosing to respond rather than react, to observe without rushing in to fix or demand. When you approach the relationship with this steady energy, it becomes easier for the avoidant person to relax into it. They begin to sense that you're not going to pressure them, that you're capable of holding your own emotional experience without collapsing into theirs. This creates safety not through words, but through presence. Understanding goes hand in hand with patience. It means recognizing that avoidance isn't rejection, it's protection. Most avoidant behaviors come from early patterns where emotional closeness felt unsafe or unreliable. When you keep this in mind, you stop taking their distance so personally. Instead of assuming they're indifferent, you see a nervous system that's trying to stay in control. This perspective softens your approach and helps you shift from resentment to compassion. During this process, small shifts matter. A brief moment of vulnerability, a shared laugh, or even a text returned sooner than usual, these are signs of progress. Celebrate them quietly without demanding more. Avoidants need to feel that they can move closer without triggering a new wave of expectations or emotional pressure. When you meet them where they are and show that you're consistent without being overbearing, you build trust over time. Real connection with an avoidant partner doesn't happen in dramatic moments. It happens in quiet consistency. Your patience becomes the foundation that allows them to stretch their limits. Your understanding becomes the mirror that helps them feel seen without being judged. Together, these two qualities create the emotional conditions where reconnection becomes not only possible, but welcomed. So, if you've been trying to reconnect with someone who leans avoidant, someone who pulls away just when things start to feel close, understand that your power doesn't lie in chasing, fixing, or forcing. Your power lies in the quiet, grounded strength of how you show up. Through soft, emotionally intelligent communication, through the gift of space without resentment, by removing guilt and speaking from clarity, not fear, by cultivating your own independence and joy, and by practicing deep patience and understanding, you stop playing the old game. You create something new. You shift the dynamic from one of pressure to one of permission, from anxiety to calm, from control to connection. And in that shift, the avoidant person can begin to feel something they rarely experience: emotional safety and closeness. Not smothered, not chased, not evaluated, just seen, just respected, just accepted. And that is when they start to lean in. Not because you pushed them, but because you didn't. Thank you for listening, and thank you for showing up for this kind of work. It's not easy to meet someone with love and steadiness when all you want is to be met in return. But it's that very choice, the decision to lead with self-worth and emotional clarity, that transforms not just your relationships, but your life. Stay grounded, stay open, and most of all, stay connected to yourself. Thank you.